listen to what they're saying and acknowledge that you heard them without really talking about the amount that they said no to. So it just says, it basically stays in a negotiation versus in a you're not hearing me conversation where they're just keep repeating what they said because you weren't listening to them or giving them a receipt. I think that is one of the biggest downfalls of this question that you're asking is don't accept an offer from the other side without asking for more. Listen to their offer, hear their offer, acknowledge their offer, again, without talking about the dollar they offered, and then move on to what you're hoping to get.
And I would agree, and I do agree with it depends, of course. However, for me, there is one scenario where I would agree with this, and that scenario would be you've done your homework, so you've done your negotiations, you've gotten all your full and complete information, and maybe the consumer says, look, I can pay you $30 a month, all right? And maybe the information that you have kind of supports that, right? The only reason why I would say yes would be everybody likes to end to a means, right? And so just because somebody says they can pay $30 a month, they probably could pay just a little bit more, right? So I like to talk about dividing that balance up into equal payments. So instead of just grabbing this $30 that the consumer patient said, look, I can pay you $30 a month. Okay, well, I understand what you're saying, Roger. Let's see what we can do to work through this. You're saying you can pay $30 a month. Your balance is, $144. How about instead of $30 a month, we divide that up into 5 equal installments or 4 equal installments? And then show that there's an end to the means, especially if you're going to be setting up any type of post-dated transaction. Follow your company's policies and procedures and your state regulations. But if you are setting up any type of post-dated transactions, there's going to be an end to the means, right? So they're going to set up 4 equal payments of $34 a month, and I'm really bad at math, so don't hold me to that number. But I'm going to set you up on 4 payments of $34 a month. You propose 30. If you pay $34 a month, this will be paid off in 4 months, and then you'll be all set. How does that sound? So in this scenario, I would say yes, maybe go a little bit more, depending on, again, getting that end to the means.
One thing that I would add to that is when you are acknowledging them and validating the positive step forward, I would do exactly that. And I would tell them, if they say, I could pay $30 a month on this, what I would throw out is, okay, great. It sounds like we're going to be able to get something figured out. Now, whereas you sound like someone who takes care of your obligations, and I want to help you get done with this as quickly as possible. I can get you real close to that, and it wouldn't be quite $30 a month. It would be $37.84 a month. I could get you set up for that today if you want to grab your checkbook real quick. What that does is it lifts your average payment. It consolidates their payments. You might want to point out that would only be a 5-month arrangement or a 6-month arrangement rather than an 8-month arrangement. So you would have some additional money freed up down the road to take care of other obligations. And then a call to action. What do you want them to do next? Grab your checkbook real quick, or would you prefer to do a check over the phone, or would your next preferred payment method, or would you prefer to mail the check in? Would you prefer to do a credit card over the phone? By the way, I'm not suggesting mailing the check in, because as we know, that's got a higher propensity to break than immediate payments over the phone.
Excellent. Well, Kelly, a question came in for you asking if you could give an example of the receipt, acknowledging you heard them, but they said no to an offer without stating the amount.
So a receipt would be like if you say, would you like to do, we can do this over 2 months, 2 payments over the next couple of months, and they say no, I can't do that. Then the receipt would be like, okay, so from what you're telling me, it sounds like you're not able to get this taken care of over the next couple of months. So is it that you're unable to pay it because of some other obligations, or is the time frame just not working out for you? So it's really talking about what their objection is versus talking about the dollar amount, right? Because if you start talking money, then they're going to start focusing just on money. And in my opinion,
They're going to start focusing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kelly.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're right. They'll start focusing on the dollar sign. The line that I love to use when they say, I can't do it over 2 months, I'll try to acknowledge them and I'll make a statement along the lines of, okay, so it sounds like the 2 months might be a little bit too steep. If I were able to get a 3rd month payment approved on this, would that work better for your budget? And they may say yes there, and then you're gold with a 3-month budget or a 3-month payment plan. Or they may still say no, and at that point, you may have to say, well, tell me a little bit about your situation and what you think might work best for you so I can see how we can work together. I just always want to advocate that you're trying to sit on the same side of the table as the consumer and work cohesively together than arm wrestling across the table like the collections of the days of old, so to say. I remember a long time ago, I used to start my sessions by saying, and I'm talking a long time ago, because I've been doing this since I was like 3 and I'm almost 22 now. But I would start off by saying, there's no room for knee breaking and knuckle bruising in collections anymore. So if you're not being adversarial and you're working with someone sitting on the same side of the table, you're advocating for that person in a win-win-win situation. And that is truly the only way that everyone wins. Because if you set up an arrangement that the consumer can't afford, you're at risk, a high risk of getting a bounced check, a declined credit card, never seeing a payment, never speaking to that consumer again, potentially getting a complaint with a client or a regulatory agency, and a whole lot of bad publicity on social media. And none of those scenarios does anyone any good.
Agreed. A win just to win isn't a win, right? A win is when you actually solve their problem. And that's when you become a really successful collector, is when you learn how to solve specific problems. And I think I'm going to piggyback a little bit of what he said, is that if someone says no, then acknowledge their no and go, okay, so I understand that the 2 months payments over the next 2 months isn't going to work for you. I do have several other options that are going to work for you. And then based on what Roger said earlier is, I work with many people in this kind of situation, and these are the things that have worked for them in the past. And I'm wondering if maybe these would work for you too.
Well, and to piggyback off of both of you, one thing that I also like to do as well, especially if you are getting that pushback where you're putting out these options and it's just no, I can't. I like to ask them, so how short of the balance are you? How much do you think you can handle every month? If this is not going to work for you, how much time are you going to need? How much additional time will you need? And ask them, let them be part of that decision-making process. And then maybe they'll come back and say, look, I really just can't commit right now. Well, what about a good faith payment? Let's do a good faith payment, and then we'll touch base in 2 weeks, or we'll touch base in 30 days. Try to keep that communication line open by again, asking them what it is that they're comfortable with and working through it with them that way, so they do feel that you're there to help them, and you've got that line of communication open, and you're more apt to get some kind of result versus just shutting the door.
So far, it seems like a lot of the conversation has been built around if you can't get the payment in full, then it's a payment plan. And I'm curious if that's because payment plans tend to work better than settlements, or is it just a preference? In terms of a negotiation tactic, how do settlements fit into this the conversation?
I'll start this.
I would say, okay. Go ahead, Beth.
No, go ahead. You got it.
Okay. Well, so I would say that all of these tools, and I'm going to go a different way, all of these cards are cards that you can play in your hand. And it's kind of like you're playing a game of spades or hearts, and you've really got to match the right card to the right situation. In some circumstances, someone might have some money, but they're a little bit short, and you're able to offer them a 10 or 20 or 40% discount if they do something in full today. I'm not an advocate of multiple month settlement arrangements to where someone's going to settle a $2,000 bill for $1,500 but pay it over 5 months, when if it's a 7 or 8 month arrangement, you get the balance in full over that period of time. So again, Mike, our favorite words, our favorite answers, and maybe the entire title of this webinar needs to be, it depends, on the situation at the time. You are going to have people that you're going to have to set up a hardship arrangement or ask for a good faith payment or offer a settlement to be done with it. You know, someone who they're not disputing the debt, but they're cranky about having the debt, and they're able, money is not the issue. If it's going to cost you 10% and you're able to do that, and it's a win-win-win, it puts them in a better light. They feel like they win. You get 90% for you and for the client. That's a great time to offer a settlement. I don't like to just throw out payment in full settlement payment arrangement. It might look like, depending again on the situation, payment in full, a down payment with a payment arrangement, a settlement, a payment arrangement, a hardship arrangement, a good faith payment. The biggest key thing here when we're negotiating and talking is that we want to get a payment in the door from the consumer, because your probability of recovering more and or the rest of that account exponentially increases when you get that first payment, that payment of intent, that good faith payment, whatever you want to call it. It significantly increases the probability of recovering it. And knowing that 83% of the statistics are made up on the spot 91% of the time, I think it enhances your likelihood by 64.3%. So pretty good odds.
Well, and you know, one thing that I really like to impress upon collectors when I do any type of training and coaching and development is getting that full and complete information, getting that summary. You know, what's the situation that the consumer patient is faced with? You know, maybe they are unemployed. Well, unemployed doesn't necessarily mean they can't pay the balance, right? And as Roger indicated, you've got your cards in your hand. Are you going to play a spade? Are you going to play a heart? Are you going to do a diamond? What are you going to work with is going to be dependent on the real reason that person is not paying their balance in full, right? So maybe they are unemployed. Well, you're probably not going to be so quick to say, well, the balance in full is due. Maybe you're going to start getting that full and complete information. What is their source of income? Are they on unemployment? How much is their unemployment? Is there any additional income in the household? You know, what other major expenses are they faced with on a monthly basis that's preventing them from paying that full balance? And so by asking these questions and getting that financial summary, you know, this person probably can't play your spade. They're not going to be able to pay the balance, but play a diamond. Maybe now they're going to be able to do small monthly payments temporarily because they are unemployed, but they're looking for work. So maybe this is somebody you're going to put on a temporary payment plan for 2 months or 3 months and then revisit the situation. And maybe at that point they are working and they are able to pay maybe the balance at that time or increase that monthly payment. So I think a lot of that now is going to be dependent on what that person is facing. Maybe it is a disputed balance. Maybe they, you know, have a concern about something, or maybe they really thought that the balance was already paid or covered and they didn't realize they had a balance. So these are questions that you kind of need to ask up front before you determine what cards you're going to play. And it can go in any direction. But the key is knowing that patient or consumer situation to be able to put it down the right path that would help you collect that account the quickest.
Yeah, and when you think about a settlement, the idea alone of a settlement tells you that money probably wasn't the reason they weren't paying, right? There's probably another reason that they haven't paid up until now, because if they're able to go, okay, if you take 90% or if you take 10% off, I can pay 90% of it. They had the money, they just weren't motivated to give it to you yet. So I think one of the best things to think about when you're talking about payment arrangements versus settling is to understand that it's not always about the money. Like, I think every negotiations is wearing a money mask, and if you peel away the layers, you'll discover that they don't think it's important to pay right now, and that's why they're not paying. So There are several reasons people don't pay, and we spend way too much time focused on the money. So if they want to, let's just say they want to clear up their debt, or let's just say they're dating someone who won't marry them unless they pay off their debts. If that's the case, they'll find the money because it becomes important to them in that moment. So we just need to teach collectors how to determine the real reason people aren't paying, and then you can figure out whether you need to push for payment arrangements or settlements.
That's a really good point, Kelly.
If the answer to so many of these questions today, it depends, and if, as Kelly said earlier, you can't put negotiations in a box, how do you train that? Like, if there's so many different ways a conversation can go, you know, the flow chart for that has just got to be incredibly complex and complicated to sort of follow based on what somebody says and how a collector is supposed to react. So how do you train to make sure that the collector is following the right steps and listening and engaging, and then sort of moving the conversation in the right way toward getting a payment and toward negotiating for the best recovery possible? Beth, maybe you can take this one first this time.
Sure. So I think, again, to get the collectors prepared, or all you collectors out there prepared to be able to determine which route to take, or, you know, how do you negotiate? I think part of the challenge, first off, is knowing your client's expectations and requirements, right? So understanding what you are able to do and what you are not able to do. Does the client offer any type of settlements? Maybe they do not. Maybe they do offer payment plans, but they're very stringent. They can't be more than 6 months, or they can't be more than 12 months. If it's going to exceed that, then there's got to be some kind of client approval. So you're going to first of all need to know, again, have that call preparation in place, know what your client's expectations and requirements are, know what your internal process is as far as when you're doing your negotiations. You know, maybe as an organization, you do follow a stringent hierarchy. So maybe it is you request that balance in full on the very first talk off. And then as you ask your full and complete questions, you start negotiating down dependent on what the consumer's responses are. So you request balance in full, and they say, look, I can't pay the full balance. So the first question will be, okay, so let me ask you a few questions to see what you qualify for if you can't pay the full balance. You know, what is your source of income? Are you working full-time, part-time? How much money do you make? What other large expenses do you have per month as far as mortgage or rent? So you're getting that full and complete information, right? And then maybe that's how you then start to do your negotiations hierarchy. Maybe you've determined, look, it's a senior citizen. She's 75 years old. She's retired. She gets $500 a month. She's not going to be able to pay a $900 balance in full. She has no savings account. She's in an assisted living facility. So maybe then you would move forward based on your own client's expectations and requirements and your company's policies to then move down to breaking the balance up into 3 payments or 4 payments. Maybe then you look at a down payment of $200 and then payments on the balance. But again, the key is understanding the patient's reason for non-payment. One thing that we did is, like I said earlier in the call, is we would have these little cards, and it would help them with specific situations. Maybe you have bells and whistles in your facilities where you've got flyouts or you've got tip sheets that come out onto the screen. So depending on the client that you're working, it gives you those negotiation guidelines to work through, kind of helps you on the phone when you're dealing with the different consumers or patients. But I think that, again, the key is understanding the real reason why they haven't paid their balance, and not prejudging that account. Sometimes, especially as collectors, we can be judgy, right? We'll look at an account and be like, oh my gosh, this person has been talked to 4 times and they've never paid the balance. Hey, that does not mean that your tone of voice, your approach, your demeanor isn't going to get the account paid. It could be you. It could be that at that point, that patient or consumer situation has changed. So it's also looking at the overall picture of the account, and again, having that confidence in your own ability to be able to look at the account history, look at what the expectations and requirements are, and determine based off of those questions that you're answering and having answered by the consumer patient are going to guide you down what would be the best and quickest option there.
So Mike.
Sorry, I had my phone on mute.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Kelly. So I'm going to drop this term on you, and then I'll explain it. Collection yoga. You got to have strength, you got to have that confidence, and you got to have that flexibility. And the way you teach that, this goes back to a very rudimentary skill that we have to learn, and Beth brought it up very early on, and that is role playing. Go through the different scenarios to where you can teach different looks and feels of the three-dimensional scenarios that occur. Maybe it's someone who's gainfully employed, however, she's and she makes good money, but she's a single mother of three. Well, that circumstance certainly changes her household income and household needs versus the same lady who is married in a two-income household, and maybe they don't have any children. So by teaching the three-dimensional model of, first of all, negotiating for a yes, because until you get a yes, they agree to pay something, it doesn't matter what the numbers are because they're not going to pay anything. The other thing I would say is a lot of times, and one of the little videos that I've made is called Mac and Cheese. It's all about consistency. With mac and cheese, if you follow the same recipe each and every time, you're going to wind up with the same warm, steamy, delicious dish every single time. If you leave a step out because you're having a bad day, or because it's late in the day, or because you're trying to talk about lunch plans with a neighbor, you're going to lose that consistent edge of exactly what you're supposed to say and exactly how you're supposed to say what you're supposed to say. The very key element to all of this, and I mentioned this in Collector Live actually, and I think I mention it in half the conversations I have on Earth, it comes from Dr. Stephen Covey, who says the single most important element about successful communications is building a rapport. So you have to build a rapport with the consumer to gain their trust in your expertise, because you as a collector are confident. And once that rapport is built, you can enhance it by showing empathy, by simply saying, I understand. That is such a powerful phrase. I understand it. It's a power word. Collectors need to use it more and more often, because every situation, even though you may have heard it 100 times this week, is unique to that consumer. And by saying, I understand, that has to be a difficult situation. I'm so glad I'm talking to you today. Let me get some information from you, because I'm pretty sure I can help you get this figured out. You're able to talk then about not if they're going to pay, but how they're going to pay.
So when I think of negotiations, I remember when I first became a trainer, my boss said, you need to write a training on negotiations. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed, kind of like what Mike said. This is overwhelming. It's a lot of information. So, and it's just like when I had to write a training on collections, right? You break it up into chunks. So when you think about collections, it's all about the system, the laws, and then negotiations. So breaking down negotiations, and I'm just going to use Roger's examples of, if you break down negotiations into three categories, it's about confidence, building rapport, and being flexible. So figure out, where do your individuals need help? Are they super confident, but they aren't flexible in regards to their talk off? Or are they really flexible in their talk off, but they're not good at building rapport with their consumers? And then really figuring out what lever do you need to pull to make them more successful in regards to negotiations? Because I think of negotiations kind of like an elephant, and how would you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So looking at it that way, it doesn't feel as overwhelming. So if you're a collection manager and you're thinking about, how am I going to take what I've learned in this webinar today and transfer it to the floor and to the collectors that I work with every day, it's really looking at, where are you strong, and let them be strong there. And then where do they maybe need a little bit of help, and then really focus your time on those areas. Because here's the thing is, every single collection call, you have to use everything that Roger said. You need to use confidence, you need to be able to build rapport, and you need to be able to be flexible in your talk off.
Excellent. We've only got a few minutes left, but we've got some questions that have come into the queue, but now's your last, probably